Let's go. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, welcome back to the Okayest Cook podcast. I'm Chris Whonsetler, your host, coming at you from the studio. And I'm joined with a super cool fellow, Mr. Greg Johnsman. Am I saying your last name correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Awesome. I'm notorious for not asking before we start running here. Mr. Greg, you are a part of Marsh Hen Mill. Is that correct? Do you want to elaborate on what exactly that is and what you do over there?
Yeah, that's it's a broad question, but I'll try to make a quick stroke at it. But Marsh Hen Mill is kind of the idea is I founded the idea of kind of establishing or reestablishing a lot of the heritage and heirloom grains, that really tell the story of the South. There's grains all over, but it's what can grow in our climate and what we can mill and kind of tell. So I come about it a lot different than a lot of people, not so much the farming background, but an old moonshiner taught me to mill when I was a kid, and
Nice.
kind of started there and was able to progress into working with chefs all over the nation.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Well, you before I get too distracted here, we like to share a notable meal of the week. Do you have any recent meals that have stood out to you that you've eaten recently?
Yeah, down here on the coast. I grew up in the upstate, so excited to be down here on the coast. But this week, I left the house on a golf cart, went down to the shrimp dock, got some local shrimp,
man.
and then what I did a little different is I had friends over, and we did the most amazing thing of eating shrimp isn't the eating part; it's just sitting there peeling and talking. So when that got done, you still got leftover shrimp. So what I love to do is I took some shishitos and I blistered them and then put some onions and just kind of put them in kind of a oil and just let them marinate, just kind of a salad. And it's just refreshing and kind of got to eat it the next several days.
Yes, that sounds amazing. Being an Indiana guy, we don't get a whole lot of fresh, awesome seafood, and shrimp's definitely something we're kind of missing out. There's some spots here and there we can go to, but nothing like what you've got over there.
Yeah, I mean the ability of what this region could have as far as how long our growing season is and how long we can kind of keep everything. It's a pretty amazing ecosystem to be part of.
That's cool.
Be able to have those flavors. Oyster season is as we call the months, is kind of the prime, and shrimp frozen in blocks, even if they're not fresh, and you can bring a block out and keep it going. But these are big whites and stuff. I love Little Creek shrimp. They're sweet, but just to have it as a snack, I think it's better. Any of those kind of salads that you can kind of let marinate, like a cucumber salad, all that stuff, it just gets better and better and better.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we like I said, we don't have a lot of the shrimp around here, but we'll touch on this later. But one of my all-time favorites is shrimp and grits. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But right now, my spring garden is off in full force, and we've got fresh asparagus popping up like crazy. And it's officially our first summer with our asparagus patch. So they've kind of told me, like, you got to let it go for a couple of years to get those roots established, and we're there. We can finally eat it now, and it's super exciting.
Yeah, down here, the temperatures, I'm sure you're aware, you can get rid of daylight so you can get white, and you can, the different varietals, and then it's how deep you plant it or how shallow, kind of how thick. But asparagus is very hard. We can grow many crops, but it's a hard one down here. I've grown it in the past, but it's hard to keep those roots viable. Horseradish will not grow in the deep South, and rhubarb.
What's that?
Yeah. And rhubarb, you got to go more into North Carolina. I've grown a lot of crops, but it just depends on the season. Down here, we kick off late February with spring garlic, and kind of onions start coming in right after. Right now, strawberry season is pretty wide open right now.
Nice. You actually having berries popping up already?
Oh yeah, but this year there was a virus that's gone through, so everybody's having a little bit hard time. But
Oh no.
but strawberries are this is wide open. We've been pretty warm. We're a little lack on a little bit of rain, but overall it's a pretty decent strawberry season.
Yeah, I've got my strawberries and asparagus are paired up. So I've got the strawberries on top and the asparagus are right below that. So my strawberry plants are bouncing back real hard, and already got some flowers popping, but no berries quite yet. We'll give those a couple months.
Yeah, and it's all on the. I grew strawberries commercially, and it's on the crown set. Kind of dictates how many berries you'll have for the season and all. And we can't winter them over here. Like, do you plant and then keep them year after year? For us, it's a one time.
Yep.
It's a one time deal in South Carolina and into Florida.
Really?
Yeah, you're not able. You'll start either with a bare root or with a different kind of plant, but it's every year has to be planted to keep them going. We don't have the chill hours at all to keep them over the winter.
So, I mean, I'm still pretty new. I mean, I'm not new to the garden scene, but I haven't invested a ton of time and energy. Is that like the strawberry just needs to be cold, like to last?
Well, there's a
dormancy. Is that what you're saying, or?
There's a dormancy that's needed for that to be a strong plant. Again, we can't produce them that way, and it's also varietal. Sweet Charlie's, Camarosa are kind of the varietals that are used in this kind of area. There's newer varieties out of Florida that are more like Freedom, and a lot of them kind of deal with kind of America varieties, but they don't seem to do well here.
Okay. Nice. Well, I love the garden talks. Do you want to shift it over to grains? And tell us what you have going on in that world. Well,
hopefully the cycle, it's the idea of what we call a rice kitchen or a biodynamic farm. So the idea is I started just wanting to procure and kind of keep varietals of corn alive. And, you can't have a crop like corn rob so much nitrogen from the ground. So we're looking for different crops to put in that cycle to improve the ground, but also rotate. Here, where we're located on the Sea Islands, we don't have a lot of commercial crops left. So all these varieties are open pollinated. So we have a really great opportunity to help preserve stuff, but not a lot of farming left on a lot of acreage and stuff. So we have an ability to hide it, grow it, but we needed to kind of do more than just corn. So rye was always to improve the soil. So we do an heirloom rye, and then you got peas again. But when people think about these peas, sea island red peas, a lot of them we put back in the ground for nitrogen. We don't actually harvest a lot of them. Okay. And also wildlife loves them, so we try to keep them off of different crops. But rice is in the mix, some heirloom wheats, just anything in the grain. As I've grown, I've tried to step away from the vegetables and just try to maintain the ability of different grains for customers. And again, when you go into vegetables, we had kind of a 6-week window, and it gets too hot by 4th of July here. But grains, we grow through the year, harvest in the fall, and then we store the rest of the year and mill all year. So for us, it's something that as a company we can keep going year round and year after year.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah, we do some corn up here in Indiana. We got the sweet corn going strong, but we'll rely on you guys for the really, really good stuff. The rice and stuff you guys have selling out, and it's super, super awesome what I've tried so far from your store. Real quick, I'll tell you how I found you guys. I was at a photo shoot, and I'm a commercial photographer, and I was doing this fashion photo shoot, and one of the crew members showed up with one of your hats. He had the Carolina Gold rice hat that you've got the sticker, but you didn't have any more hats left in your store. But I wanted that hat real bad because it's just such a cool looking hat. And went to your website, and I found your grits hat, which I absolutely adore that guy. So we found that, ordered some rice because the crew member that was wearing your hat said it's just the best rice ever. And so he just kept talking it up. Like the whole week he's talking it up. So I'm like, man, I got to try this rice to see what's going on. And and once I was on your website, I saw the grits, and I was like, oh man, got to get some grits too.
So you eat grits on a normal basis?
I wouldn't say normal basis, but I would say for an Indiana guy, probably above average.
Well,
If I had to,
just don't put any syrup on it.
well, that's a question. That's a question I had for you. Are you a sweet grits guy or a savory grits guy?
Man, grits can be made all different ways, but it's just it's got to stick to you. You got to enjoy it every morning for breakfast. So it's
Yes.
just everything's regional. Everything's different on how people use our crops, and the idea is for us to be a flavor seeker and keep the flavors alive, and then let the individual or the chef tell the story. And that's the exciting
Yeah.
part. So many things. Let's say I was a hot sauce company. I'm telling you what I want it to taste like. That's what's so exciting about these heirloom grains is we're giving you the base. We're giving you the opportunity to hold hands, share with us, but also tell your story. And that's the exciting part of working together and kind of doing it, is not defining for everybody exactly how to do it. I mean, I don't want to get too sidebarred on grits, but there's what I'd call three main ways of cooking: kind of water, a milk product, or a stock product. And it could be a version of all those mixed together or any of the one derivatives. And it really changes kind of how the dish is and what it's going to be done and the longevity cooked behind it. So each kind of has its own signature and the ability to do it. So instead of us telling you have to cook grits this way, there's opportunities for you to kind of do it
Right.
all different ways.
I love that. Yeah, I mean that's what makes food so exciting is that personality you can put behind it and the creativity, and you know we're all eating the same thing, but we're all cooking it a little bit different, which is super
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. It's always interesting, but yeah, I mean grits in history. When you said sweet corn, I hope people can understand or do the history to understand when sweet corn came in existence. I mean, when you say sweet corn, you're barely talking in the 1950s.
Oh,
It's
really?
oh yeah. So I mean, it's a very relatively new crop. I mean, we're into super sweets and numbers, and we can go on about all that, but the earliest varietal of grits we work with is called Guinea Flint. It's a small kernel and it's a small cob of corn, and it comes out of Cuba in the early 1500s.
Oh,
So,
geez.
yeah, so totally different than a traditional southern dent corn. And also, sweet corns are modern field corn. What they produce per bushel is what I would love for everything we're doing to produce, but it's not possible. So,
Yeah.
just to give you an understanding, kind of the national average on any kind of field corn, growing for feed for like animals, there are 320 bushels at least an acre, if not more. So that's 56 pounds times 320. That's an acre. That guinea flint produces 15 bushels an acre. So most people laugh at us and even ask why we're growing it. But once you taste it, it's the stovetop stuffing of the corn world. It has this just unbelievable flavor. It never creams, but it has this flavor. But that's just one varietal, and every variety tells a story, and that's what we're trying to keep alive.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there with, just saying like corn's changing. Produce is changing. And we had a guest on not too long ago, last week, actually. He was talking about, Chef Nikki was talking about, oh, I've got my grandma's meatloaf recipe. And how come when I make it, it's not the same as when grandma made it? And he's like, well, you're not buying the same meat. It's very different today than it was even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. And yeah, produce specifically, like if you look it up, like apples don't look anything like they used to. Corn doesn't look anything like it used to. Like we're evolving it, we're changing it for, bigger yields and more money, and we're losing that history. And I love that you're, striving to keep it alive by growing these smaller yielding products that taste better, but people are ditching them because they don't make as much money.
Well, it's telling a story for us, and when you really understand corn as an example, corn was based off of uh, genetically looking or selecting, and everyone that has these older names like Paymaster or Prolific, these were all names for that reason. So honestly, to give you a quick little history, kind of neat buzz is that was based around
Yeah.
fairs. So the reason I say a fair is people would go to a fair and they wanted to show off that their yields were better or their something was better.
Mm.
Flavor was already there. People cooked at home and people had to flavor, but they were looking for how to. They didn't have scientists to help them and stuff, so they were selecting. So they would literally just go in a crop and they would see a stalk that had 2 full ears and the other ones had one. So they would pick those, and then they started saving that seed. So the hands before us are telling the story, and we want to kind of maintain that. There's rationale and reason when you look at different parts of what they've saved, and then we have to go through. We have 7 soil types, and we kind of go through a all different network of farmers that help us to see, is it going to grow here? How can we grow it? And is it effective? And then is the flavor there? So we'll test them, but it doesn't guarantee you'll ever make it, even for your pot to even try. So there's been a lot of varietals
Sure.
to try to get us to where we're at. And it's just important. And I want that memory. It's exciting how you said it about the meat doesn't have the same taste. Well, the cool thing is the corn can have the same taste, So for us, it's trying to maintain that. I mean, rice in this general area was really big in the 1680s and was shipped to princes and kings around the world, and there's notation about that. So we try to pull from those notes and understand what made it so special, and figure out what we need to do to kind of maintain that story. Yes, our products aren't the cheapest on the market, but if you knew how many people had to help to get it to this, it's important for us to be able to pay the farmers. We started as a family growing everything, and I had 3 hurricanes back to back that just knocked us out.
Oh, geez.
So from that experience, I've realized you can't put it all in one spot. So we truly try to help as many farms and find a way that we can work together.
That's awesome. Yeah, commensality. You gotta take care of the people taking care of you. So
well, and not one of us can tell the story by ourselves. So
yeah.
You're giving me the ability to represent so many people right now. I'd love to say it's me. It's not. It's just I get blessed to kind of represent so many people. Some people are going through hard times. Some people are just able to do different things. But to tell the complete story, it takes all of us. And Absolutely. It takes the help of what you're doing so people can even understand. Because the hat alone is the blessing. I mean, to get the story out there, I can't do it. And for you to get excited and then question and then look us up, that's what we want. We want the ability for people to find us and then be able to tell the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you make a solid product, it's hard to not talk and brag about it and want people to experience this awesome product. And you made a fan with the crew member, and he's wearing your swag and talking it up like crazy. So I'll be honest, I haven't tried the rice yet. So I got an order. The grits distracted me. So I went on your website for the rice. I found the grits, and I was like, man, I'm going this direction instead. So the rice is still in my fridge, and I want to talk about that later on too. But man, the grits, they're just crazy good. And I guess the only thing I had to compare them to is just your standard big box store. No, I wouldn't say instant grits. I try and at least get the stuff without so many ingredients in it. But yours just, I guess, straight from the farm and fresh milled, and gosh, it was just outstanding. I can't describe the flavor. It's just a million times better. Well,
I want to comment on that because every varietal I could kind of tell you that has a different flavor profile, and that's what I look for. Our blue has this floral value. Jimmy Red has this nutty value. Some have higher sugars and starches and oils, and that's what we're looking for. Is we listen to the customers, we listen to chefs, and we're trying to fill what they're missing and try to figure out how we can get that flavor to you. Because what we do is it's cold milling. We do everything to preserve as much. So my hands are only one little step of the process. So if I do it quick, modern mills we call, roller mills, not all companies, but it's a crush and run. It's the idea of making as fast as you can. We're doing the complete opposite. Sure. We're using small equipment that we have to have multiple uses or multiple different mills just to try to keep up with the demand of what people are asking out of us. But I can't make bigger or anything faster because the heat is our enemy. So my daddy was a physicist, and his whole thing to me is controlling variables. So that's where a lot of this is all coming about. Is you said ingredients. We don't have but one ingredient in any of our products. It's just the product. We don't add anything for preservatives. We don't add anything for flavor. Shelf life we want you to keep it in your refrigerator, freezer after you receive it, and that's just to help the oils and sugars stay in its best state for as long as possible. But we do mill
Sure.
to order on purpose. All this is to have the customer or your flavor palate enjoy what we're doing.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I got three. I think I got three of the grits, the red, the blue, and no, I got four. I think I got four: red, blue, white, and yellow. Do you have more than those options, or is that the?
No, we have more. We do a mix of white and yellow. So speckled is kind of important to me. It's not visual, but it does kind of mix the best of both flavors. And it was something that Georgia calls it Georgia ice cream, and we didn't want to step on their toes, so we just call it speckled, and whatnot. But we have a unicorn, which I coined the term as a joke. Was we started with one cob of corn, so we call it unicorn. Yeah. And it wasn't for little girls. It wasn't for the pink of it. It was to create a different market. But each one has its following. And what's interesting about pink and blue, to maybe nerd out a second, is those are actual, call it either a back cross or a genetic defect. So what I mean by that is if you would look all over in yellow corn, occasionally in old heirloom varieties, you'll see like one kernel of red, and in white, you occasionally see one kernel of blue. So a friend of mine started saving those random kernels, and then the birth of a new variety, because it was a part of its DNA. But usually, like in Jimmy Red, we have a yellow in there, and if you pull that, it diverts back to Jimmy Red. These actually diverted to keep the colors of the pink and blue. But the reason I say that is those, if you use acidity, you can bring the colors out. And most corns, you can't do that. So acidity, lemon and lime juice works better. Buttermilk works. But anything acidic, and like the blue will almost go like Viking purple.
Oh, no way.
So it's a really neat trick for people to try and stuff. And it's just because how that corn was made up to get that colorway.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. So I've tried the white and the red so far. I think of the Jimmy Red and the I should have them in front of me right now. I forget exactly what they're called.
You're fine. There's a lot of other varietals of corn. Ceremonial varieties are very dry, and they're mostly from out west. The different native varieties. Hopi Blue is very, ours is a dead corn, but there's Texas has some more Tex-Mex style. There's a brown, there's a green, but again, we're looking for visual, but we're also looking for flavor. So every variety for us kind of has to go through different kind of things. And then can we scale it up to bring it back to people, which is a difficult thing. I mean, we could talk a long time about that. I don't think people realize how many years we put into just beginning to bring that crop back, let alone to actually get it into production, that we can get it far enough. Conch peas is an example that we had a total loss last year. So after about 3 to 5 years to bring it back, we don't have anything for the general public this year. So I can't guarantee that we're always going to have everything.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the price you pay though for quality and like the heirloom products, and especially when you're playing with genetics. Like if you're trying to keep that blue kernel out of all the yellows, like it's kind of a hit and miss game, especially if it's like a recessive gene that gives you that blue. Like you're probably not always going to grab that, so it's tricky.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like the price you pay for quality is just time. Like it just takes a lot more time than that mass produced stuff, and I think it's 100% worth it because I'm here for flavors. I don't need the bushels per acre. Like give me the small batch stuff with 10 times the flavor and the history above anything else.
Well, the general public and restaurants change every day. I can't ever pinpoint what's going to happen next, but COVID created this massive ability for people or desire to start cooking at home. Flours went through the roof. Everybody became bread bakers and stuff at the house. So, so it's changed, but some generations aren't wanting to learn to cook and stuff, but it's interesting. So we want to see how we can kind of entertain and get people excited and see what they can do with it.
Yeah, I love that. Would you say your you sell more direct to people like me just cooking at home, or restaurants, or is it kind of 50-50?
I'd say we're a little bit heavier to restaurants and to
Okay.
the wholesale market. And my background in farming kind of pushed us to always go in that direction. But we as a business want to grow and educate and get the general customer population back in and involved. I mean, the idea is you go to a restaurant, try it, and then you're like, that's amazing. And then it's like, can you cook it at home? Absolutely. So I
Oh yeah.
think I think the ability is to grow, direct to consumers. We had it, like I said, in the past with COVID, because we lost all the restaurants. I own a couple restaurants, and to see the change, it was difficult, and just trying to understand, the distillery brewery market has been very hot for us, and it's really starting to slow down. And it's
I've
just
heard
that,
that.
yeah, it's just that, and that's what they're looking for, interesting flavors. So they'll approach us for small. So in my opinion, I think that distillers and breweries are going to being the bar. They're being the direct, to consumers. But
Hmm.
the ability, some markets are so flooded, there's so many that they just can't get it out to a larger audience. So it's just it's ebbing and flowing. It's just changing with time. So we have to constantly
Yeah,
kind of also change with the time and make sure that we're, working with everybody and how we can, continue to move. We can't. It's no different than the hurricanes. I can't put it all in one spot. So, you know,
for sure.
I think the growth, to answer your question, is I think there is a growth. Restaurants are coming back, so that growth is occurring naturally. But I think the growth is there for the newer generation to want to cook and stuff. So we are seeing an uptick in, the 20s and 30s in cooking and trying out new recipes and all. And it's exciting to get people, relating or doing stuff that, past generations have done.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's kind of why we started here. Just I hate saying cutting out the middleman, like just trying to skip the restaurant, trying to do more at home. It's a little bit cheaper doing it on your own. It's a little bit more rewarding doing it on your own. Yeah, it's probably not going to taste quite as good, if you're the skill level I'm sitting at over here. But it's if when you pull it off and it's like a spectacular meal, you're like, man, I made this all myself. And it's a lot easier, like I said, with just awesome quality product like your stuff. And appreciate what you guys are doing over there, and I'm pumped to try the rest of the stuff. And I guess we could shift over into different things like your cornmeal. And a question I have. Well, let me back up. I was asking my wife and my oldest boy here before we hopped on the chat. I was like, "Do you have any questions about grits?" And my 5-year-old looks at me and he said, "What is a grit?" Is it legit just crushed up corn?
It is, but we do a little bit different than most people. So let me explain something a little bit. So, we use antique equipment. We use an actual piece of equipment called a grit separator, and it's important. So, in mass production, it is a crush and run to crush everything, but you can only get a percentage of any kernel into grits. You can make everything into cornmeal because you can crush it fine enough. But as things crack, there is in the interior of every kernel of corn, it's called germ. And germ is so soft that you would never be able to have it crack into the particulate side of a grit. It would
Okay.
be too small. So we do a balancing act, we do cold milling, we do things and then varietals that we're looking for heavier ability to call it the meat, the larger crack that we're looking for of the grits. But we want it to attach to kind of hide some of that germ, and that's where a lot of the flavor profile comes from, is if we can do it. So our cornmeal is separated again, but our cornmeal, again, when I started the business, cornmeal can be what I call kind of Appalachia, kind of mountain cornmeal. It can be very gritty, and restaurants just wouldn't use it. So our cornmeal is almost the corn flour, and we do that on
Mm.
purpose. And it's not only for the flavor profile, but you can use it for breadings. You can use it for a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
grits, you sell them quicker by volume because you cook more. Cornmeal, breading doesn't use as much. So we also looked at varieties that produce different things, and not to go down a rabbit hole, but for me, it's important to look at the percentage coming out of it, look at the quality that's coming out of it, and then kind of decide for the customer But yeah, I mean, there's regions that don't really use grits and use cornmeal. The word polenta, we could speak for a long time on polenta. There is a real thing called polenta, but some people call in regions grits polenta. Some
Hmm.
people in the deep south call hominy grits, which they just mean grits. They don't mean actual hominy. So the terminology can get kind of mixed up when I talk to different people, and I kind of understand it. The cool thing that you might think is, when I get phone calls, I can almost guess what state you're from on what variety of corn you buy. So, for
Okay.
instance, Chicago is yellow corn. They love yellow corn in Chicago. It's where you're going to get grits. But like regions of North Carolina, yellow corn is considered only for animals. So
Hmm.
they only want white. So I grew up in the poultry industry, and we make the skin on the East Coast very tan looking for appeal, yet the West Coast likes it very white. They like it very, it's not iridescent, but they like it not as tan looking. So corns and all kind of follow the same suit. It's kind of how you eat with your eyes, and I've learned a lot from different
Sure.
regions and how people are looking at stuff. So there's nuances, and we try to listen to our customer base and fill their needs, but also keep varieties going at the same time.
Yeah. So what it look like when my order came in and I'm just getting like all the colorful stuff and give me the reds and the blues and
We knew
want to
you
try
wanted
it
to
all.
try. Yeah, that's right. And we like those customers because that feedback. Some of them get super excited. I mean, the Faro Piccolo is the most ancient of all grains. That's the gentleman in Austria that was frozen. That was what was in his satchel. And you
Hmm.
know, Faro is just explaining size. So it's kind of like Einkorn, Emmer, Spelt are the three varieties, and the Piccolo is the Einkorn. So we're after the. It's not gluten free, but it's very close. We're after the story of the flavor of it, and the protein level is the highest of any grain. So for certain
Love
people,
it.
they're looking for that, and that's when you say you tried everything. That's what we want. We want a chance for you to try it. We get feedback back and kind of see what people are looking for and how we can improve on. Is there other products? We're at 27, 29 products. I didn't set out to do 27 products, and my head has still got a half dozen hidden inside that we've been working on for years. I can't even talk about
Okay.
that. We're trying to. Some are just adding on to what we're already doing, for a different flavor and things that I've learned with chefs, and just trying to see, can I ramp that into a large enough production to actually get it on the market again, not just for one chef. So it's
For
always
sure.
interesting to kind of see how we can develop it, and then if we can actually sustain it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's a teamwork. So like you might be in charge of selling it, but then you got to get the people to grow it, and can we? Yeah, like I said, can you produce enough and find the right people for the job? And
Well,
there's a lot going on back there.
well, it changes every day. I mean, I've got a farmer that my main corn grower that it's a long story, but our farms and back in history, his granddad grew for where we produce everything, and now he's going through a hard time in life of he's got Hodgkin's lymphoma, and his 19-year-old son has stepped up to
Hmm.
run the farm. But like we're all working together, and we're all going to see it through. Whatever I have to do to change in my daily for that family, I'm going to do because they're part of us. I had recently two brothers come into the business, and they're my partners now, and their whole thing to me is it's family. So each one of these steps, everything we're doing, it's a family. We want to make sure that each person knows that we're part of this together, and we want to help each other in whatever it takes. Because you're absolutely right. I can't do it all myself. I used to think as a young man I could do it all myself, and my temper and my temperament got in the way of what I expected out of people. And I've got to have some kind of other OCD or something else that is, that's an effective thing for a small business owner, but it's also a crutch and a
Sometimes.
problem. Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. I can't leave anything. I have to make sure it's done, and it helps me. But that hyper focus at times can be too much. But that's what excites me about the history. That's what excites me about telling the story and making sure people understand, who helped and how we can even, get every year. There's going to be a crop that does really well and a crop that fails, and we just have to figure out how to blend all that together and kind of support each
Okay.
person through the process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brilliant. Well, let's go back to your products here, and You already answered another one of my questions. Basically just the difference between grits and cornmeal, and basically you said just the cornmeal has
It's
more
very
corn in it,
fine.
more of the corn. Yeah,
Well, it's more
yeah.
germ
You're
in how we process to get it separated down, but there's nothing added. But the cold milling has its beauty because again, stones, everything we use, it heats up, but we're trying to keep the endosperm, the germ, everything in its best shape and form of that kernel of corn, when you dissect it. But again, only the finest is turned into our cornmeal. You could turn the bigger pieces if you crush it over and over into that, but we don't want that. We want to preserve those larger
sure.
chunks for the grits. And polenta, a true polenta, I was taught by Malia Milano out of Italy, and the idea is there's an aeration process as much as the particulate. So what it does, it creams different. So again, the word, people can argue with me in some areas, polenta, I've been, they're like, no, that's what your grits are. And then other people say it's cornmeal. And then some people say, so the idea that I try to explain to home bakers that really, they grasp the idea of the word polenta is this, is when you see a loaf of bread that says it's whole wheat, that means everything's included. Well, that's what the word polenta truly means. Is in Italy, their varietals of corn are completely different than ours. They're not separating. They're keeping all the parts of the kernel together so you get the full robust flavor. And that's what's important. So our polenta sets on the market completely different than most people. So I get excited. That's the one, if I see in your cart and you try it out, that's where I know somebody's listened and they're wanting to see kind of the flavor profile different than just buying something, because that one takes a lot of extra time and it has the flavor it's just different, and it's how you cook it. It can be done as a porridge, but polenta just has a lot different applications and uses if you kind of look at history.
Yeah, I mean, we all love polenta over here, just kind of putting that under a steak and all sorts of stuff. The uses are endless, but it's just, I mean, it's very similar to grits, but I guess the way we make it over here, at least in my circles, it kind of comes out like almost, I mean, not, you could probably cut it with a knife, so it's a little bit more stiff. I don't know if there's a official traditional way to do it.
No,
if it should be more creamy.
Yeah, a grit cake kind of falls into that too. We have a lot of chefs that kind of do a polenta cake or a grit cake, and it kind of, can be have a hard crust or something on it, but it creates a different look and flavor profile.
Yeah, we're mixing a lot of Parmesan into ours, and that just sends it over the moon, like just extra creamy, extra, like I said, get that dairy in there. And
cheese is not a bad thing with grits.
Yes.
That's my pot liquor recipe requires as much smoked Gouda as possible. So, that's an important thing.
Yes, that's the way to go. Yeah, top it with a few shrimps, we'll be good to go. Well, let's stop talking about grits here for a minute. It's kind of taken over the show, and I apologize for that. Because what drew me to you initially was your rice. And like I said, just my buddy, the crew member, just head over heels with your rice. He's like, that's the only rice I'll ever buy again. It's just the best of the best. Do you want to tell me or talk about your rice and what you have going on in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, so for me, again, we could talk for years about corn, and I never wanted to go beyond that thought pattern. That's where I wanted to live my whole life. And rice found me. I didn't find rice. And most people don't even know. So
you started with corn?
Oh yeah. That's all I ever milled and worked with. But rice tells the story of so much of where I live currently, but also it's so different than people think. Carolina Gold is the parent crop, and Charleston Gold was bred off of it. We've grown other rices. We've done the Forbidden Black. We've done Jefferson Scarlet, this beautiful red rice. But customers are asking us to pay the homage and to tell the story of this beautiful, beautiful crop that Georgetown, South Carolina, if you go in history, is the largest shipping port of all times out of South Carolina based off of that rice. And it was exported at such a huge rate. And it just, if you were standing in a field right before harvest, it smells like you're in a bowl of popcorn. It has this aromatic, it's an aromatic rice. To to tell the other part of the story, I know equipment. Equipment is my, like, where I just live. I love antique equipment, and I did a lot of research into how to process rice, and there was nothing good about the original way in the
Hmm.
America to processing rice. It was leather. It was beating it. It was breaking it down. It was ruining the bran layer, the oils, the nutrition. So we turned to Japan to modern. It's the only thing we do modern, and found that we can really keep the quality different. But the funny story there is, you know, I, I'm a simple man. I don't know how to speak, other languages, and I really don't know how to conversate. So to get equipment based on Carolina Gold was reading stories, and Carolina Gold was prizes this long grain rice and all this beauty. And so I ordered all this equipment, not even knowing what I ordered, with a lot of money being spent. And come to find out, I ordered everything wrong, because it's not a true long grain. It's really a medium grain. We prized it and we put it in that category. But when you're actually processing rice, you have to look at it different. It's a very plump rice. There's a grassy note to it. It's an immature rice. All these things I tell you
Hmm.
because if you're hearing that, that's what the flavor comes from. That immaturity, that grassiness has this earth quality to it. The popcorn bowl of how it harvests and dries. All these are the notations of the flavor. And instead of it being a long grain and stretching, being kind of a medium grain, then it has this robustness of kind of thickness, which hides kind of how it grows and how that flavor profile. So all these things I had no idea, but that's the beauty of this crop. Is it there's so many men and women that struggled and they kept this alive, and then they kind of hid it because after the war they didn't want people knowing how they did it. And
Hmm.
we've worked with scientists and research people, and it's a very lodging. It grows tall and it lodges, means it breaks and blows down and we lose crops. But birds, I
Hmm.
mean, we could talk about all the birds ruining the crops and how they come in and eat everything in what we call the dough stage, the milk stage, meaning it's very sweet right before harvest. And we have to kind of work through all these problems. We don't have chemicals and all this licensing and all this great stuff to kind of help this crop, but it has this story that when you eat it, I can't recreate what you're experiencing. It's just so exciting for people to taste. And when we got in the market, I didn't own a rice polisher because I wanted everybody to have it in the brown. But over time, other people put Carolina Gold on the market, and they polished it because it cooks quicker. So that
Hmm.
education taught to you and others is, we sell Charleston now only as Charleston Brown. So we're trying to differentiate, so for people to try how some of these things were natural. Carolina, we have a select group of chefs that will yell at me if I polish it, but that's a very small number. People are looking at cook time. So we actually went a little bit crazy and looking into history, and we got something called a microscore instead of a polisher. So imagine just taking and scoring. So what you're doing over time is it's cutting it open, but it's leaving that flavor there instead of just polishing it off like with a
Okay.
piece of sandpaper. So we are looking at ways to differentiate ourselves on the market, but also make sure we can give that kind of that flavor profile. But man, I don't have any other rice to compare it to. I'm a corn guy through and through, but like having this rice, and down here, I wouldn't call it the deep south, but like my growers, they're growing the butter beans or other crops as well. And just to stop at the farm and I bring the rice, and they just whatever's fresh, lima beans, whatever's coming out of the field, and just serve it over that rice is just one of the most amazing things to have, kind of together. And your ham is, I got a great friend producer, Tank Jackson. He is the greatest, craziest farmer in the whole world. And I tell you that because he'll take his stuff up to Benton Bacon. I don't know if you're familiar with Benton, but like they
Hmm.
cure it in smokehouses and on this salt brine. But like why I tell you that is, you use all the trimmings. People think you need all this like huge amounts, but use the trimmings of that fat back or something, and add it into the rice and the flavor profile. And then down here on the coast with the seafood, I mean, it just it has a story that I grew up in the upstate. I'm kind of more in the Appalachia, you know, thought process and
Sure.
greasy beans, other stuff. So to have this flavor profile as rice, I can't compare it to anything, and it's just the most amazing thing to be part of.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, dude, I love that history. That story is super, super fun. Um, and all for flavor. I love that the fact that like you're trying to honor it, through the flavor, tell that story through the flavor. And, it's not a mass produced thing. So it's going to be a little different batch to batch, I assume. But, yeah, just honoring what it is special, and just, appreciating it for what it is, instead of, trying to force it into another box and just fit the mold.
Well, what's crazy is, the two brothers that are going to help the brand grow, the Reed brothers, like, we've been talking, and like, they're like, your rice is in the top 3 products at all times. And I'm like, yes, but there's a big problem. And they're like, what's that? I was like, nobody knows we have it. We're not known for it, but it has this audience that seeks it out. So like, with your help and others, to even know it's there, to get people to try it, to be blown away. Some people, the funniest thing that I think is crazy about rice, grits, whatever, about grains, is I'll get calls and they're like, well, I followed your recipe and it didn't taste like my recipe. And I always say, well, then why didn't you cook your recipe? I'm not trying to. So the reason I said is, like, our bags, we get complaints. We don't have recipes on the bag. So we learned that if you put a recipe on a bag, you're, to a certain group of people, you're defining that this is the only way to cook that product. And again, when we started this conversation, I told you there's all different ways to cook it. And I don't want to define it. It's supposed to be a base product where you take your take. So it's important. We have recipes or suggestions, but if you do early rice recipe suggestions, every single one will say after cooking, so it's not that this is right. It just shows you how early a recipe is. So it will say after it's cooked, you need to lay on a pan, put it in your oven, and then turn it and fork it. So there was a drying process that they wanted that stickiness to come out. So I'm not saying it's correct or incorrect. It just shows you what an early recipe is. It's just like when I argue people about like skillet cornbreads, the guy that taught me to mill about cornmeal being used for cornbread, he would always say early recipes never had flour because people ground one product and made the skillet cornbread. They weren't going to make it light and fluffy. And I hear people say, well, that's not as cake-like as I like it. I'm like, I understand, but I'm trying to have you taste the skillet, version, the thin, where it's got the crust and everything. And you're not going to achieve that unless you add flour. And people that grew their own corn didn't have these extra products to add in, so it a lot of the recipes begin to kind of tell the story of who was able to cook, how they were able to cook, what incentives or what extra income they had in their life. If you start looking at early recipes, it starts showing you, corn was never in early plantations. It was rare that corn was served in the head house. Corn was a nutritious way to feed your workers, if that makes sense. It wasn't a high-end crop. So, you start looking at early recipes, then you start realizing who ate it, then you start realizing what it was for. It was to nourish people on a cheap thing. So then they weren't going to have all this fancy frills, in it. My pot liquor recipe with all the cheese and all, like you're saying, is what I want, but like, early recipes would have never had anything like that, and then here in the Deep South, you talked about savory and stuff before. We didn't have maple syrup, doesn't exist in the Deep South. So you did have cane syrup, but that's a totally different kind of flavor profile. So it's just kind of exciting to think about what was here before the grocery stores and how you traded. And another thing that's important for you to hear is corn and all, when it was produced, how a miller got paid was, we call it a tariff scoop. This is, 2 generations back, but they would have a scoop. And let's say I'm the farmer and I bring my corn in, the miller would just take so many scoops out of a known quantity and put it to the side. So when the farmer left, he didn't ask the farmer to pay him for his milling. He then, that tariff, that a group of corn he took off, he would sell that to people in town, be it doctors, whatever, lawyers, teachers, whatever. And that's how he got, so there wasn't a transition of money. There wasn't, payment, done in that way. So it kind of starts explaining a lot of the history and how people save certain varieties and stuff, and how people kind of work together in a totally different scheme than we work today.
Yeah. I love, everything you just said, especially, about, proper corn or I say proper cornbread, but like original cornbread, like where it all started. I know we're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of the Great Depression, and like you said, just people used to grow their own food. Like were no grocery stores. There were no options to like, oh, hey, I need some tomatoes. So I'm going to go buy tomatoes in the middle of December. So it's like you eat what you have on hand. And like, I've never thought about that before. It's like, oh yeah, like it's not, quote unquote traditional to mix flour in with your cornmeal to make cornbread. So like stuff like that, I've just never had to think about before, but.
Well, and take the West, the idea John Wayne made popular about the corn dodger and all this. All this was how do you have no refrigeration? How do you travel with these biscuits and all that can sustain? So those recipes kind of came out of that style cooking and how they had to travel and stuff. I mean, you might enjoy this, the Michelin Guide. So my dad worked for Michelin in the upstate of South Carolina, but Michelin built tires, but they had no desire. They had no need for the car to go anywhere. So the Michelin made the Michelin Guide. They made a map to make the ultra rich leave their town to go to the neighboring town for a reason. They had no reason to go anywhere. So that's, people don't even know the history of like that the tire was invented, but they had no purpose in the tire to drive around on one city street. So by having to say that the next town had this amazing restaurant, now they had a purpose and a map. So that's how the maps came about, and that's how the Michelin star came about. So
Yep.
it explains a lot of kind of how movements and, like you said, how things are carried and how things are. I covet cast iron skillets. I collect stuff from a certain era. So you go pre-wars, and they would steal in factories certain parts of the cast. So cast iron has changed over the years because of what was needed to keep society going for war efforts. So it cooks different, it's thinner, it has different things, and that's what I look at is how that pan cooks and stuff. And like I said, I've got a great crazy group of chefs surrounding me that have just as many problems as I do, is wanting to understand how this stuff works. And then we kind of trade notes and stuff, and it kind of gets exciting to see that there is differences in the corn varieties, in how it's cooked, and kind of work through it.
That's super cool. Well, I'm gonna have to dig into your website's recipe section a little bit more, and try and find some of those, authentic, straight from the past techniques, and change things up a little bit here in my kitchen.
Well, the sad truth is, and there's a good starting point a lot of chefs offer up, and our hope is, I'm not giving a big secret out, but we're working really hard with a couple of people to finally put some of these recipes together in a book. We've asked this for years, and we finally have a couple of people interested in trying to help. My deal is not a chef, but we have people that want to kind of work with a chef and kind of get some of these recipes down. But it's very interesting, understanding the differences. But my pot liquor recipe, it will never be in a cookbook and never be online, because a pot liquor, meaning that someone licks the pot because they fight for it. But mine is, I tell everybody, I make grits. You make your grits however you want. And I also used to call it the dump recipe, meaning you dump everything in. But man, all I would do is cook a good pot of grits, a cup and a half of grits. And I do like a 4-to-1 ratio, four parts liquid. And then if it's thickened, then I thin it out with like a half and half, just so it longevity cooks. And while it's doing all that, I don't put a lot of effort into any of that. I always cook a log of Jimmy Dean sausage. I don't know what's magical about sausage over bacon, but you cook that whole log of Jimmy Dean, you crumble it, just let it all crumble. As soon as that pot of grits is, creamy, done, ready to go, you throw in all the sausage, you throw in a can of Rotel, and you throw in as much cheese as you can stand and just mix it up. And man, there isn't people that say I won't eat grits. When I put that out, people fight to eat it. But it's Rotel can be done yourself. It's basically hot sauce, tomatoes, peppers, and onions cut up fine. You can do all that yourself if people don't know what Rotel is. But just sausage that it's not a true trilogy, but just the idea of having that product in there for flavor. And you could have dairy or not, and just that cheese. I like smoked Gouda, but it doesn't have to be smoked Gouda. Just whatever cheese fancy.
I think it needs to be smoked Gouda.
Well, but I challenge you to try that recipe for your kids, especially. It's too
Yeah.
simple, it's too easy, and it's too good. But like, we go from that to, you alluded to shrimp and grits. I mean, I have seen so many takes on shrimp and grits. It's amazing to see how vast and how people do it, from a heavy gravy to a tomato gravy to a mushroom bisque. I mean, it's like, it
Hmm.
is insane to see how many things and how many. You would think that that dish couldn't be so humble and done so well or so high end, but I've seen it done so many different ways. It's always exciting to try, and I never get sick of trying them. I had a chef the other day that told me the only way they cook our grits for shrimp and grits is they get a pan that's like piping hot and put a lot of butter in it, and then they roast the corn
Hmm.
prior to boiling it for a long period of time, because they want that nuttiness. They want that. They already sweated, to make a roux ahead of time, so they're getting all that leftover in the pot, kind of from that roux for their shrimp and grits in there. If people have ever done a true roux, you caramelize your onions down, and it could have bacon or whatever, but just leaving everything in that pot leftover, and then roasting the corn in it, then actually boiling it, and then putting everything back in. So it's kind of a one pot recipe, but it's over time, and it builds the
Yeah.
flavor profile. And is that how I cook it? No, but it's such a cool, interesting take on the dish.
Yeah. It sounds amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always the dishes that take the longest that turn out exquisite like that. Like I can't imagine that's a quick process,
Well, you
especially
say
making
that
roux and
you say that Miss Emily Meggett has since passed. I had the pleasure of. She was the matriarch of Edisto Island. She's got a couple cookbooks out. It's been on New York's bestsellers. She's descendant of Gullah Geechee, and she has this amazing cookbook out. She has since passed. Her daughter was one of my employees for years and really came close to the family. But what she did with corn for grits, I've never really seen anybody do. And she said, Greg, you have to wash, and you have to wash. And what she was doing, so she was a cook at the Dodge Plantation for 45 years. How did she learn? She was told to do it over and over. And the stories about her
hmm.
biscuits, they would take a wood, spoon, hit her on the hands if she didn't do it right. But the reason I tell you all this is her grits cooked super quick, and she did it over a fire. But what she did, and she didn't know what she was doing, is the washing aspect is, you have the pericarton that's kind of unpalatable, and it does attach itself to grits, and it washes to the surface, and she would skim that off, and she did this over and over. Most people barely wash their grits. Most people barely skim, and then they just start cooking, and they start stirring. She did the complete opposite. She spent 15, 20 minutes just washing and
Hmm.
cleaning off the surface, but it became such a pure group of corn that it totally changed the cook time and the flavor profile. But again, she did it for 45 years and didn't even know what she was doing. So it's
Hmm.
exciting to watch people and then understand what they're doing. And I never sat there and said, Miss Emily, why are you doing that? I didn't say anything at all. I just watched and I picked it up. And it was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. Now, do I wash my grits like that every time? Absolutely not. I'm quite lazy when it comes to preparation with that kind of stuff, But and she did it over an open fire. I mean, over a stove that, like, she just had knowledge of where the hot spot was, and she just cooked that
Oh
way.
man.
It's so cool to see people that can do that and be part of that. And it's just, for me, I'm a loudmouth, but at that point, I'm not a loudmouth anymore. I sit back and I just watch and I watch
Soak it up. Yeah.
and I just try to soak it up. I'm sweating in the corner from the stove being 180 degrees, or it feels like 180 degrees, but it's worth the pain knowing what you're getting out of it. And then you transition that to, you meet a chef or something, and then you just tell them that idea, and then they make that into a dish, and it's a beautiful thing to tell. So we're able to help tell her story without anybody even knowing it. It's still, evolving and still going.
I love that. That's super, super cool. We've had a couple chats with other people. My wife is number one, where she's kind of regretting, not paying more attention to what grandma did in the kitchen. And, especially when it relates to a specific dish that grandma used to make. So that is amazing that you had that foresight and that thought to sit back and just observe and
Well,
watch and
there's
learn.
there's a reason why my namesake My last name's Johnsman, and my grandmother wrote all her recipes down, and she since has passed. And guess what? Not one recipe works. She purposely left an ingredient out on every recipe
No.
because she didn't want anybody to be able to cook. She had a ginger snap that if my mom was sitting next to me, she'd say, "Yeah, I never could duplicate your father's mom's cookies. You can't. The recipes don't even say that." So there was something missing in that. And the reason I say that for people to even think or consider is spend the time with the loved ones and
Yes.
don't do anything but just watch, and you'll pick up something. I mean, my brother-in-law Whit grew up in Tennessee, and he said he had these two. It's the coolest thing. My whole family waits every Christmas for this. So he grew up to two widows or two sisters, and they made these peanut butter balls at Christmas. And he told me, he's like, there is no recipe. Y'all need to watch my hands, and you can't duplicate these things. And it's not like a Buckeye from Ohio that more the fudge. It just has this amazing flavor profile, and there is no recipe. He just duplicated by watching it. And that, Miss Emily, all these things have taught me that there's these little things that you need to watch. Is there aeration? Is there a resting period? All these things have to be thought about.
Absolutely. Man, that's super cool. Well, Mr. Greg, unfortunately, we are getting real tight on time. I've got a million more questions, so we might have to do a part 2 coming up here at some point. But dude, I'm extra excited to dig into some of that product a little bit more and just relive the history. Just think about where these things came from. I'm more excited now than I was before. Just the fact that it is that authentic of a product. Like if it's truly not something that you're going to find on the shelves everywhere you go. And like I said, it might be paying a little bit more, but I can attest, like the white and the red grits are 100% worth buying straight from your website. And I'll go back 100 times again and buy more of it because they're that good.
Well,
Absolutely love it.
I appreciate time, and I just would love, we love to hear feedback. So as you cook the stuff, if you run into other people that have questions, let's get back together and have the opportunity to answer some of those questions. Because that's all we can do is kind of learn from it and figure out how we can, grow from it.
Yeah, absolutely love it. Well, hang tight real quick. I'm gonna end up the episode, and then we can we'll chit chat a little bit more off air. But thank you so much. You already gave us the stellar recipe. Typically, we save that for the end, but I'm not going to make you repeat what you did there for your what do you call it? Your stick pot?
No, pot liquor.
Yeah, pot liquors. Yes, the caffeine's all worn off right now. But
yeah, everybody needs a good pot liquor recipe.
Oh, dude, it sounds so stinking good. I can't wait to give it a go. One question about that, though. If you had to recommend one of your products, which one would you grab first for your breakfast? The red, the white, the yellow.
Yellow grits. There's just something traditional for me of eating yellow grits first thing in the morning. It just answers all the questions for me. I just
absolutely love it. Well, you mentioned earlier specific regions tend to purchase more of a specific variety. Who's buying the blue the most?
We've got a large following in California for blue. We have a restaurant chain that makes a crouton actually out of it on their salads. Ooh. That they get really excited. Is probably one of the biggest users, but believe it or not, weird, interesting fact, our number one seller for blue is Amazon. So we have more customers on Amazon buying blue than anywhere else, any chain that we kind of put blue corn on. So I don't know why, or if it's that hard to get in regions or what they use it for, but that's one of our largest sales of any product is the blue goes through Amazon.
I love hearing about that, like just the regions and preferences, and it's all food memories. We had an interview with Alan Sternberg, a local chef here at Bluebeard, and our food history, definitely encourages our preferences and our future purchases. So absolutely love the behind the scenes kind of take on who's buying what. It's super fun.
Cool.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Greg, really appreciate you. Again, hang tight here for a sec, and we'll keep chatting. But yeah, really love having you on, and really appreciate the knowledge, and definitely can't wait for a part 2 coming up.